should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are webcasting to you for the very first time from Tower 1 in the Warner Center here in Woodland Hills, California. This is the new home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters, and it is also the new home of Autism Live. Well, this actual space is not the home for Autism Live. In just a few weeks, we're going to be moving into our new studio, which is being currently built. So for the moment, we're in some temporary digs. We're coming to you in a sort of, I'm calling this Autism Live Light. We've trimmed down our production, so you're going to see we're not shooting on a green screen right now, and it will be a little bit interesting. It'll be fun. You know what they say, when things get normal, shake them up a little bit. So we're shook up for you today, thrilled to be here. Love this new format because we're going to be able to have conversations with Kelby, and I know you've all been craving that. So right here at the start of the show, I want to remind you, we're going to be with you live for the next 2 hours talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. And during that hour, one of our favorite things to do, in fact, the whole purpose of this show is to be interactive with you. We want to participate with you. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's going on with you. Now, Kelby is going to remind you of some of the ways that you can get in contact with us here. Well, I remind you that our homepage is still, that hasn't moved. It's still autism-live.com. When you go, there's so many things to do. But in particular, we'd love for you to do a couple of things. We'd love for you to join our email list so that we can be in contact with you and let you know when things are happening. Because sometimes things happen very last minute. Some of you may not have been aware of the fact that we were doing a show today. We weren't sure we were doing a show today. So be on that email list. It's free. We won't bug you, but you'll get to know what's happening as it's happening. But also you can be watching the live show there. And to the side of the live show, to the side of that computer screen is what we call the live feature. It's a series of boxes. If you put your cursor in the one that says your question, you can start typing whatever you'd like there. You can ask a question, you can give a comment, you can say, Shannon, you got your hair cut really short. What were you thinking, right? Or you can tell us where you're writing to us from, or you can let us know something that's going on in your life with a person, whether it's a person that you're working with who's on the autism, your child who's on the autism spectrum, or you yourself are on the autism spectrum, something that you're having difficulty with that you'd like to talk out with somebody. It's free. We have a lot of experts that we bring onto the show that are there to be able to answer your questions in whatever format. All you have to do, like I said, type, hit enter. That's it. There's no login. There's no username. There is no cost to you, and it's completely anonymous. We have no idea who you are or where you're writing to us from, which is why I usually encourage you to put some kind of information about what's the closest city so that we can be more helpful in telling you what resources are available to you. But you don't have to do that. And by the way, if you have stuff that you want us to get back to you about individually, maybe there's a study that we talked about and you say, hey, I need this to go to my IEP, you do have the option of giving us your email address so that we can get back to you. That takes me longer. I'm just keeping it real here, keeping it honest. It takes me longer to get back to those emails. So if you want to, you can also reach me at s.penrod@autism-live.com, and you can go there and leave your questions too. For some of you, when you leave a longer question, the live feature only allows you to leave, I think it's 1,000 characters, and that might get frustrating, so feel free to go over to my email, s.penrod@autism-live.com, and I'm much better at getting back to people on that. Sometimes it still takes a while because sometimes I get inundated, but it's faster. In any case, I hope that you will participate with us because, again, that's what this whole entity is about. We've missed you in the last 10 days or so, and I'm thrilled to be back here with you. I do like to remind you at the start of the show that we do bring experts on the show, but I am not one of them. I am an autism mom and a former teacher and somebody who feels very passionately about all the wonderful people that are in this community because I'm a part of it. My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. He is now about to be 12, and I can't even tell you how proud I am of that young man and how excited I am for him and for the difference that he's going to make in this world, because he's got some things to say now because of the wonderful, wonderful, life-changing therapies that we got to participate in. And we got to participate in them not because I could afford them, because I assure you that I could not. We got to participate in them because we got good quality information, sometimes from other parents. And I promised myself and the world and the universe that if the universe and the good Lord above would help me to help my child, that I would turn that around at some point and do what I could to help somebody else. So I'm here for you. I want you to know that even in this period of time that we've been apart, I've been reading the things that you guys have written in, have felt your presence, and we're here for you. If you need somebody to hold your hand, remember, we're all in this together. We can do this together. So write your questions in, tell us what's going on. Sometimes just telling somebody what's going on is helpful. But when we can hook you up to resources or give you ideas of where to go next, that's everything, right? Okay. So we like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. And on Autism Live Light, we still want to do that. It's going to be a little bit different today or for a couple of days as we get our equipment geared up. But I wanted to talk with you today about one very specific jargon term. So our jargon term for today is elopement. This is something that we've all heard the term, right? It's one of those scary terms that it can be so misconstrued. If you're in the autism community, you hear this term elopement, and I don't know about you, but I thought, oh, is that when two young people go off to Niagara Falls to get married? No, when we're talking about elopement in the autism community, we're talking about when an individual leaves an area that they were supposed to be in, and they leave it without permission or notifying someone properly that they're leaving it. For all intents and purposes, it means that the person is lost to us. It may mean that they're safe, but to us, we don't know where they are. It can be so frightening, and we know that there are a large number of individuals on the autism spectrum who will elope. There have been some studies that have suggested that it's more than 50% of individuals with autism will elope at some point in their lives. I think that this is a real line in the sand for those of us that have kids on the autism spectrum, because almost everybody who has had a child has gone through a period of time where kids will run off, right? The typical 2-year-old toddler will at some point toddle off, and it can be very frightening. But for those of us who have kids on the autism spectrum, unless we get a great deal of intervention, if our child is prone towards elopement, they will continue doing it their entire lives. And it can lead to, huge detriment, including loss of life. So important that we understand what elopement is, that we understand that there is help, that there is hope, that if you it takes a lot of intervention. If someone really wants to elope, it takes a great deal of intervention. This is not something that you just meet with somebody on a Tuesday, talk it through, and go, oh, okay, now we know what to do. We'll never have this problem again. That's not the case. Huge, huge intervention that takes a great deal of time, but it's very effective, very effective. And if you stop and think about it, if it took you 2 years to ensure that your child was going to be safe and never leave and be lost forever, it would be 2 years well spent. And it's not 2 years of every moment working on elopement, right? But it's 2 years of working consistently, probably every day, on elopement issues. And at the start of it, it's so important that you're working with a board-certified behavior analyst who can identify the cause of the elopement. So important to realize that some kids elope to get away from something. And so if we know that they're doing it to escape something, there's a specific intervention that we want to do to give that child other skills to be able to say, I don't want to do that, or I'd like a break, or I need to get away from this, I'm feeling this way, so that they don't have to elope and run into traffic or run to a swimming pool. You see what I'm saying? Now, for other kids, it's not elopement. It's running to something because they want to go swimming, or they want to see that cat that's had kittens at the house that's 3 doors down, or they want the piece of candy that the stranger is offering them, right? They want to go to something. so important that we understand completely all the reasons why a child elopes before we start an intervention. That's the only way that we're going to be effective. And I do believe that working with a board-certified behavior analyst is key to understanding what will help your child with elopement. We're going to be talking a little bit about elopement throughout the show today, but really wanted to give you a good idea of what exactly elopement is. It's terrifying if we're dealing with this in the autism community. That's our jargon for today. Now, we always have a question of the day for you, and our question for you today is, if you could change something, what would you like to see changed? We're moving into a period of time in which here in the United States, we have people who are starting to declare their candidacy for President of the United States. We're going to be inviting as many candidates as we possibly can get onto Autism Live to talk about their viewpoint on autism. But before we do that, we kind of want to hear from you guys about what exactly, if you could change something, what would you change? We don't want to assume. So write into us. We're going to have a little bit of time later on Facebook in particular to be looking at what you guys have written in. And then we always have a topic of the week. Our topic for this very special week coming back is about being the change that you want to see. I got a really good lesson from my good friend Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson not too long ago when I was talking to her about the state of California, and when someone elopes here in California, what can be done. And I was saying to her, it's dismaying to me that we have a wonderful law that's called the Amber Alert, and they've spent so much money on all of our highways to put signage up that will notify all of the people on the freeways in California if a child is abducted, so that we can all be the eyes and the ears of the community and help that child to be reunited and be safe with their families. But when a child with autism elopes and is missing, no system. And I said to Nancy, before we leave this planet, we're going to have to work on this. And Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson said, not good enough. We need to get some legislation on the books. And she was instrumental. Within 2 weeks' time, had amended a law called the Silver Alert in order, and it still needs some work. And we're going to be talking about the Silver Alert this week, about how it didn't work so well in the last couple of weeks when a teen on the autism spectrum was missing, and why that is and what we need to do next. But it reminded me that I can't just sit back and go, well, that law doesn't work. We have to be the change. And I hope that all of you will join me in finding the way that we can be the change for ourselves, for our kids, for our students, and for the world at large. So we're going to talk about that. How do we be the change? We don't want to be overwhelmed. We don't want to sink our own battleship, but if we can make a difference while we're here, wouldn't that be a good thing? Okay, got an exciting show for you today. So thrilled. We're going to be starting it out in just a few minutes after the first break. We're going to give you an update on that teenager that was missing last week, what we discovered about the Silver Alert, and I will give spoiler alert that Kimberly has been found. And she is well, I understand, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But then we have a wonderful guest who's going to be joining us for the first time. Cantor Stephen, and I'm going to totally mangle his last name, Puzarne, I think but he's going to tell us how to say it. And he has a workshop that's coming up this week that's called A Spiritual Response to Autism. Now, before you get all emotional about it, let's hear what he has to say. I think it's an interesting topic, and many of you have written in and said that part of your journey through autism, whether it's as a parent or as an individual with autism, includes a spiritual life. And so I thought it would be fun to talk with him about how he sees this spiritual response to autism. And then we have a lot of catching up to do with you. Many of you wrote in questions over the break, and we're going to be answering a lot of those. And before the show is over today, we're going to do a workshop on how to use the skills program to be able to empower yourself at an IEP meeting. And guess what? This is for everybody. Whether you're the individual with autism, you're the parent who's sitting at the meeting and feeling like you don't really understand what's going on, or you're a teacher or administrator sitting on the other side of the table. If our goal is to help the individual that this individualized education plan is for, then let's really help them, and let's do it in an individualized way, and that's what skills can help us all to do. So all of that and ever so much more coming up on Autism Live Lite today. Thanks for being with us. Take a look at this.
It's every parent's desire for their child to have a great start in life. Yet there is a condition affecting more children's lives than pediatric cancer diabetes, and AIDS combined. Autism strikes 1 in every 150 children.
Today, 1 in 110 kids in the U.S. will be diagnosed with autism. That is a huge jump from 30 years ago when it was 1 in 30,000.
Startling new report finds the number of children with autism is skyrocketing. The Centers for Disease Control estimates 1 in 68 children has a form of autism. Now that's a 30% increase in just 2 years.
Well, a lot of this with all the accomplishments over the last 20 years, I'm thrilled.
I think what kept me was the feeling that, you know, I would have a parent come to my office late at night at UCLA and just fall apart. And this is a long time ago. There were much less back then in terms of services and knowledge and so on. And I would just sit with the family and the parents and walk them through and try to take away some of their fears, you know. And at that point I realized, I think the thing that's actually most important to me is that process. I mean, thank God that I've been very, very lucky and blessed to have so many incredible clinicians join me along the way and just develop CARD in such an amazing, magnificent way. That I could, you know, for me it was more really about how can I help the families? What can I do for the moms, the dads, you know? It is just, and I feel like, you know, there's no way I would ever really know because I haven't had my own child go through this, but I've experienced it with people a lot of times.
Hi, this is Megan. I'm in first grade all by myself. My teachers are so fabulous. I like to read books. I like to go to my friends' birthday parties. I like to invite my friends to my birthday parties. I once had a sleepover with a friend. I like to have play dates with my friend. I'm the best reader in my class. I like to go to the library. I like to read different series of books. And here's how I learned to do all these things. By my card friends and Dr. Grandpichet. Thank you, card friends and Dr. Grandpichet.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're thrilled to be here with you this morning. If you're just joining us, yes, we're in slightly different digs. As I mentioned at the start of the show, we are in a makeshift studio while our studio is being built. We're in Tower 1 of the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. We're loving our new space, but the show's going to look a little different for the next couple of weeks, but it's kind of exciting, and we love to hear from you how you like it. I promised you before the break that we had an update on Kimberly Greenberg. If you were watching before we took our break, the last thing that we did was put out a video about Kimberly, a 15-year-old who went missing from her home. She had had an argument with her mom, and her mom had taken away her phone. It's something that happens in our lives, but Kimberly left. And it wasn't the first time that Kimberly left her home, but always before she came back, she would take a walk around the block and cool off a little bit and come back. But that night, she didn't come home. And she went missing, I believe it was, it was longer than 15 days that Kimberly was missing. And we were asking for help and information from anyone, and we were told today that Kimberly was found yesterday in Culver City. She has been reunited with her mom, and we couldn't be happier about that. We understand that there are several people being detained by the Los Angeles Police Department while detectives are continuing their investigation of where Kimberly was. But we understand that she is healthy and that she is able, because we were concerned about whether she had her medication and had access to her medication while she was missing, but we're told that she is reunited with her mother and has been able to get medical attention to make sure that she has the medications that she needs. We couldn't be happier. We want to thank the Los Angeles Police Department for continuing to work on this case. I personally want to thank the Los Angeles Police Department because I spoke to them on several occasions, and I thought that the level of the questions that they were asking was very encouraging to me. It is so important that we all of us in the autism community continue to talk to police officers and let them understand what autism is and what it isn't. It's difficult. We can all remember a day when we didn't completely get it. And then we started to understand the particular brand of autism that we were dealing with, and then we continued to be educated about the fact that once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. We have to allow ourselves to educate our police, and by the way, that's all of us. There was a time in my life when I thought, oh, well, someone else is taking care of that. And yeah, someone else is, and they will continue, but I'm a part of that too, as are you. So again, we want to thank the LAPD, and I want to thank the California Highway Patrol for their participation as well. They also taught us that we have some work to do on the silver alert. I know many of you wrote in and asked us, why has a silver alert not been called for Kimberly? And what we found across the board was that while we passed legislation, the legislation wasn't enough. First of all, because it didn't allow police to use those Amber Alert systems. So we're working on that now, and we're going to ask your help for that as the date approaches, that will go into committee and then hopefully be signed into law. But we also discovered that there had not been a bill asking that the California Highway Patrol and the LAPD be educated as to some of the new language that we had put in the Silver Alert that allows for them to call it in the cases of someone who is in some way cognitively impaired. And it's really important that we do educate those members of our first responders who that will be important for them. And we don't want to wait until another individual is missing. So thrilled that this has a happy ending. And of course, I'm sure we'll hear some more about where Kimberly was and what happened to her. I was in contact with her mother last week, and I know that she was, as any of us would be, understandably distraught about where her child was. But we might have an opportunity to be talking with her on the show, and who knows, maybe we can also have a conversation with Kimberly. But I thank you for all of your support in finding Kimberly. She has been found. Yay. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with Cantor Stephen, who's going to be talking to us about a spiritual response to autism. Stick with us.
Riley has high-functioning autism, and I'd say I noticed somewhere between 9 months and a year. Looking back now, I can tell you everything. I mean, there was no pointing, there was no shared experiences, speech was not coming, the interactive play was not coming, those things weren't happening. You know, you go to the pediatrician, they tell you, well, sometimes boys are slow or things might take a while to come along, but it still wasn't happening. And right when he hit the 2-year-old room in preschool is when the wheels fell off the wagon. That's when we got some intervention. That's when we figured out, you know, how are we going to address this problem. The first thing I did was I got a mentor, because there's no book on what to do with your autistic child. I mean, there's many books, but each path is individual. So I got a mentor, a really nice woman named Marlene. She has a daughter with Asperger's, and she told me, go to a psychiatrist so you can have your child fully diagnosed and a rock-solid diagnosis that can't really be attacked. Call CARD and do whatever they tell you to do. That was probably the thing she talked about the most. Get in touch with CARD. She actually put me in touch with Evelyn from CARD, and calling CARD was like amazing, because I really felt like things were finally going to be okay. We were going to get the help we needed.
We tried a number of different things before we could get into CARD, and you could really see the difference in the data keeping, really addressing what his issues were, whereas the other places we had been, it seemed pointless to me.
We've talked about this, and I feel like we met a lot of really nice, well-intentioned people.
Right.
And then when we got to CARD, we met a lot of really nice people who could help us because they had the experience. It was ABA, which I think is the only way to go with your child if you're trying to overcome autism. And if you go to CARD, the people are so qualified, and there's so much of a database on how to approach this. It's just like they come right in, and we started off with let's have Riley sit down for 2 seconds, because he couldn't even get that. And we worked on baby steps until now he's in first grade and he's working at grade level. So it just starts with baby steps and it keeps working on, because they have a way to approach every single problem, every single tantrum, every single thing you're going to come up with. They have a way to approach it and help you get through it.
Yeah, I'm always amazed, like at our clinic, we'll be having a specific problem and how good they are, all of them, the therapist and your team leader, at coming up with a solution, something to try, and it almost always works. Whatever the particular behavior you're trying to deal with, they're really good at them. They know the answers.
He likes a lot of stuff I think regular 7-year-olds like. He likes to swim.
He loves to swim.
He's a fish. Likes to ride a scooter, loves Toy Story, loves playing on the iPad.
Loves
Loves
Justin Bieber.
Thought you all baby mine.
Good job, buddy.
High five.
High five.
High five.
Yeah.
CARD's been good about encouraging us to do things that maybe wouldn't occur to us, like him learning to ride a bike was really them saying, hey, it's time, let's do this, and helping us do that. And so he can ride a bike. He's still working on the brakes a little bit, but you know, he can pedal a bike. We can go to Balboa Park and he'll ride happy as a clam along the bike path.
If you think something's wrong, it's not about you. Don't bury your head in the sand. Go get help, because the help is out there to make your life and your child's life just so much better. And if you're lucky enough to get in with CARD, I can't even tell you what a difference it's made in our lives. From 4 years ago, just the quality of life we have, the quality of life Riley has, the progress he's made from being a child who wanted to stay in his room and play Toy Story and line up his Toy Story dolls all day, to a first grader who's working at grade level. It couldn't have happened without CARD intervention, without ABA, and without all the wonderful people we met there.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here in our new makeshift studio with a wonderful guest. We're welcoming Cantor Stephen Pizzarni. Did I get it right?
Nailed it.
That's amazing.
It is.
Because I slaughtered it earlier, and for that I apologize.
It's okay. I didn't hear it.
Okay, good. Well, don't watch back on the tape. But thrilled to have you here. I got a postcard that told me about this wonderful workshop that you're having that's called A Spiritual Response to Autism.
Yes.
And I thought, what an interesting thing. And then somebody wrote to me and said, hey, would you like to have the gentleman who's doing this on your show? And I said, yeah, you betcha, I would love to. So I'm glad it worked out, and thank you for coming. So we should start by talking about what the event is, where it is, when it is, and who is invited.
I would be delighted to. This is part of a larger event that's sponsored by Cedars-Sinai. You've heard of them.
Yes.
And something called the Kalsman Institute, which is part of Hebrew Union College across the street from USC. And this is the second time they've done this very interesting event. It has about 100 events spread throughout the greater city. And it's called, if I get the terminology right, A Week of Jewish Wisdom and Wellness.
Okay.
And it's looking at spiritual responses to many things: Alzheimer's, aging, illness in general. There's yoga classes, all sorts of things. 2 years ago, I applied to be one of their presenters. And after some rigmarole, they agreed. And I did the original one at the Holy Spirit Retreat Center, which is one of my absolute favorite places to do. I've actually held Jewish High Holy Days at this Catholic Retreat Center, and they're very welcoming and ecumenical. Glad to put a good word in for them. Many people don't even know it exists.
I've never been there.
Havenhurst, just off of Havenhurst and Ventura, is a whole other world of this beautiful Catholic Retreat Center.
Okay.
Anyway, I did it 2 years ago, and we turned out about 50 people, and we sang and we danced, and we had parents who had experienced my work. Mm-hmm. My organization is called Vision of Wholeness, which says a lot.
Yes.
Because I've become convinced over the years that the eyes that we have to see the children who are called autism, whatever they're labeled or libeled with,
right,
both of those, how we see them will have a huge impact. If we see them as broken, which the interventions tend to do, they, you know, what I often say is that, I'll just get off on a slight tangent here. There tends to be a focus on what I call identifying, quantifying, and modifying everything that's wrong with that child. Everything that's wrong. We're going to get a list of it, and we're going to get in there, and we're going to work on that, even before there's any sense who that child is. And, you know, my attitude is that, you know, in my term, we'd say that's chutzpah. You know, so I presented this event 2 years ago, and we had a very interesting mix. We had people of different faiths and ethnicities. I had pastors in the room because my work is trying to engage the spiritual community in supporting these families who are struggling and oftentimes isolated. And I don't believe that the mental health community has done enough for them. And I work for the Department of Mental Health. I was the former chairman of their clergy advisory committee. They've not done enough. And the faith community has not done enough. So these are all things that are my goals. But anyway, I was invited to do this event 2 years ago. We had an interesting mix of people. And I think I did well, you know, didn't know for sure. And then I heard that the Kalsman Institute, as well as Cedars, were going to do this event again. And it's an enormous undertaking. You can imagine 100 events throughout the city. But they felt it was worth their time, money, and effort. I was very busy. I've got new students. I'm working at Temple Judea, specifically with their special needs students. And I said, you know, I don't want to go through this whole application process again. I applied. Well, they called me, and they said, would you do it again? Which really validated the fact that it hit a real point, and that this issue is important enough to them. So I felt very honored. This time I decided to put it, since it's being sponsored by 2 Jewish organizations, I decided to hold it this time in a Jewish setting rather than a Catholic setting. So Temple Judea, which is my home, basically I take on the training for bar and bat mitzvah of what I would say the most challenged. And I love that. And what I say to them and to all the other congregations, and by the way, this is something that all faith communities need to be involved with. My way into these children is through bar and bat mitzvah, but believe me, every tradition has some kind of ritual that can speak to these children in very, very profound ways. So back to the logistics of it, on the 26th of April, which is just over about a week and a half from now, a week from this coming Sunday, at Temple Judea, given the blurb here, which is 5429 Lindley Avenue in Tarzana. And you can RSVP to me, and can I give my phone number?
Absolutely.
424-903-9318. I'm reading it because I don't always remember it.
That's okay.
And
if they want more information, I just want to stop for a second and say you can go to www.templejudea, which is templejudea.com, to find out more about it.
Or to my website.
Okay.
visionofwholeness.org.
Okay, visionofwholeness.org. But they do need to RSVP.
We would prefer it. You know, there's no fee for this. This is all being underwritten by Kalsman and Cedars. And I do want to say that Temple Judea was very generous in offering us their facility.
That's wonderful.
And they have a magnificent new building that they rebuilt their synagogue, and it's just maybe a block or two north of Ventura Boulevard. So it's easy to get to, very close to the White Oak Avenue off-ramp.
And again, we're talking about Los Angeles because we have an audience that's around the world. So if you're watching someplace else and you're going, where are they talking about? We're talking about in Los Angeles here.
San Fernando Valley, actually, to be more specific. But this is a message that can be heard should be heard all over the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the kinds of things that you're going to be talking about at something called a spiritual response to autism. And then we're going to get a little bit more in depth because you brought up something about how we approach therapy, and I want to go a little bit more in depth about that. So stick with us. We're going to be back with more right after these messages.
What is autism?
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 I've been asking myself that for a very, very long time.
Let me think
about that one?
Trying to,
Jeez. Let me think. Oh man, that's a rough one. Yes. Autism is a neurological disorder that affects many of our kids in different ways.
It's a learning disability that affects the cognitive functions of the brain.
A lot of people have the misconception that it's a disability, and it's really not.
I look at it as like a special gift.
When one person thinks differently from another.
It's an opportunity for everyone to learn to understand someone that's a little different than them.
Autism is the ability to educate.
They're given so much talent in different areas.
To me, autism means a chance to be with and be around people you really care about. Autism is beautiful.
It's a way of seeing the world differently.
It's always unique, totally intelligent, and sometimes mysterious.
Happiness that comes out of my son's hard work.
Is a movement.
Unpredictable.
That's right.
Awesome.
Love. The field I want to work in.
Laughter, fun, joy. Autism is beautiful to me.
I want you to remember these 3 words. There is hope.
Hi, welcome to Camp Discovery, a free-to-play suite of fun, interactive learning games for kids 2 and up, designed by experts in autism. Camp Discovery will open your early learner to a world of new skills, shapes, numbers, colors, locations, emotions, and more. Let's get started.
Please choose a level.
Objects. First, Camp Discovery's Intelligent Preference Assessment determines your child's preferred reward for choosing correctly. Okay, got it. Let's play. Camp Discovery creates a motivating learning environment for your child by minimizing incorrect responses and maximizing successful ones.
Find the shoes.
Respond correctly and your child is rewarded with their favorite animations.
You did it.
Respond incorrectly and our unique prompting system guides your child to the correct answer by making it the largest choice.
That's not it. Try again. Way to go.
Continue to answer correctly and the size gradually reduces until the child makes the correct choice independently.
You win.
Success! Rewards motivate learning. Complete a round and your child is rewarded with a fun mini-game. Track your child's progress with easy-to-read graphs. Multiple settings options allow you to customize Camp Discovery to your child's unique needs. All this in one single app, the Camp Discovery app, available for free on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Store.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with Cantor Stephen Pizzarni. He is from A Vision of Wholeness, and he's been talking with us about a wonderful workshop that's coming up on the 26th of April that's called A Spiritual Response to Autism. So this, as you mentioned, you've done this before. This is going to be the second time that you're doing. What kinds of things are you going to be talking about at a workshop called A Spiritual Response to Autism?
Well, I believe, now I've been doing this kind of work for about 10 years. I am a clergyman and I'm a professional musician, both of which have a spiritual quality to them that's inherent to that. So even though I also have a degree in sociology from UCLA, where during my studies there was a professor there by the name of Ivar Lovas, and I studied with him. So I understand the scientific, empirical, clinical, statistical, actuarial, need I go on, approach to life. But as a musician, as a clergy person, as someone with a Buddhist practice as well as a Jewish practice, I understand that there is more to life than can fit on a medical records chart. There is more to life that can be statistically analyzed. And that most of what really matters to us in life is really intangible. And if we pretend, for scientific reasons, for empirical reasons, that we can reduce these children to a series of very quick diagnoses, this, put them on a bell chart, they fit here, we are going to lose these children. And we have been losing these children. And what I maintain is that, you know, there's a series of, you asked the question about what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
So one would be a fundamental shift, a core, almost revolutionary shift in the way we approach this whole conversation. This is going to be a conversation for possibilities where people can share, and some of the people, quite a few people in the room are parents of children on the autism spectrum. Some will be professional practitioners. There's a woman who is very connected to this organization called Profectum. I'm not sure if you heard of them. I was at their event 3 weeks ago. Mona will be there. So we're going to, it's what I call the 3 Ps, parent, or maybe 4, parents, preachers, practitioners, and pedagogues.
Okay.
I like alliteration, by the way. I write lyrics, so I love things that either rhyme or that are alliterated. So before I said, there's a tendency in the clinical approach to these kids to have a very quick 10-minute, sit on the floor and play with some blocks and come up with how we're going to identify, quantify, and modify everything that's wrong with that child. And as by way of example, I had an opportunity several times to present my work at Cedars. I've also presented at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Autism, which you may have heard of. Those of you in Cleveland, shout out. Several times at USC, Cal State Long Beach twice. Cal State Long Beach, by the way, has a new course called Spirituality and Social Work. So the notion that spirituality is core to who we are is beginning to get some amount of recognition, certainly in the medical field, mind, body, spirit. In the field of social work, we're now seeing it. The only place we're not seeing it is in the area of autism. The autism interventions are still dominated by a very reductionist, limited, empirical, clinical approach, because that's all it's funded. And that's all that's researched. So most of us know now that there's movement. I work with a ranch where we do equine assisted therapy out there in Shadow Hills, Special Spirit, fantastic place.
I was just there on Thursday.
In Special Spirit?
Yes.
Ava's a dear friend, and I live 5 minutes from there, and it's just fantastic.
My son was there, and we went riding on Thursday.
How great is that?
Yeah.
So we now know that there's many different things that these children need, and they need to be seen in ways other than their deficiencies. Yeah. So what I say is, rather than identifying, I love that way it rhymes, identifying, quantifying, and modifying them, it's not just their behavior, because it's almost like they are their behavior, and we know that that's not true.
Right.
The spiritual part says, why don't we see, celebrate, and support who they are, what they love, and what they're good at. And that's a world apart. Those two things exist in totally different paradigms, and I want to see that paradigm move for our sake, for the sake of the families, and for the sake of the children.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because you and I haven't had a whole lot of time to talk before this, but what's interesting for me as a parent is that I learn every day how lucky I am. That my child, I got incredibly lucky that what I heard about for him therapy-wise early on, I thought was everywhere. And I'm seeing now, and I learn every day from the parents that write in on the show and that participate, that a lot of people are experiencing exactly what you're talking about in this shift of these two entirely different things. I have to be honest with you, though, I didn't experience that.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, and part of the reason why I'm here and in this building is because I work with a group of people that I think every day see that. And it's part of the reason why I think I host this show, because I think what you're talking about is totally possible, because that's what my child got. I was saying earlier that later on in the show I'm going to be talking about empowering everybody at an IEP meeting, because it's supposed to be an individualized education plan, but so often you see that you go in and it's a cookie cutter.
Right.
Of this is exactly, and we've presupposed who your child is and presupposed what they need, and it's always shocking to me, because I didn't experience that in my son's therapy.
Even in the capacity in which I work, pardon me for interrupting,
No,
I've sat in my share of IEP meetings.
Yeah.
I'm invited in by the families to try to reveal to the people in that room a very different side of the children that they see in the school. There are a couple of anecdotes about that. Some years ago, I was working at Vista Del Mar. I had been brought in to help create their special needs bar mitzvah program based upon the years of work that I had been doing this. And what I would see is that, you know, I mean, there was one story that was kind of shocking to me. There was this one little boy who came in, and he was happy, and he was singing, and he would help set up. He didn't even have to be asked. He just got a lot of pleasure.
Yeah.
And I'm training him for his bar mitzvah, and he's doing well. And you know, he's on the spectrum. I'm not denying anything. There's no reason to deny anything. But he's great. We're having fun. He's learning. And the mother comes in and says, "Oh my God, he got thrown out of another school today. I don't even know what I'm going to do." And I said, "You know, Pamela, I'm really," names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Yes.
"I'm really struggling to get my mind around this and get my head around this. Here's this boy who comes in, who is loving what he's doing. He's being approached spiritually, musically, and he's responding.
Yeah.
I can't see him. Well, what did he do? Well, he pulled a teacher's hair and he kicked her. And
yeah.
I said, I'm sorry. I can't, reconcile that. And what she said truly broke my heart, because it meant that she had been hammered with so much bad news about her son from people who were experts and meaning well, that she had given up on him. And you know what she said to me? "Oh, don't believe him. He's just faking it here. That's not who he really is."
Oh, how sad.
So I looked her in the face and I said, I want to, and this was chutzpah on my part. This is a parent.
Yeah.
But I needed to say it. I said, "Pamela, are you willing to consider the possibility that this is exactly who he is? And that isn't.
Right.
And that something he desperately needs is not only not being fulfilled, but is being trampled on.
Yeah.
That is being completely damaged.
Yeah.
And his actions are justifiable." I didn't go to quite that extent. I'm sort of, elucidating on it.
Right.
That I think a person who senses in their soul that they're being damaged has a right to act out.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many of these behaviors have nothing to do with autism at all, but have to do with the way that they're treated.
Yeah.
Treated clinically and interpersonally.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important that we look at everybody as an individual, and I love, it's often attributed to Albert Einstein, and I always murder the quote, but you know the quote about if we judge a fish by its ability.
would you like me to read it to you? It's in my phone.
I would, because it's a brilliant quote, and as an ex-teacher, it was something that was always on my mind about
I have to warn you, Shannon, this is a brand new phone, and I still don't know how to use it.
Oh,
but I think
used to that.
I think it's in here.
I always say my smartphone is smarter than I am.
But this is actually a good segue, because you asked me what types of things that we would be doing. I have in my work, you know, you kind of like my grandfather was a very fine carpenter, and he had a toolbox.
Yeah.
And they held his tools and they helped him do his construction work. I also have a toolbox that I reference and I bring with me in here, on here. Those are about 25 or 30 principles, spiritual principles. They come from Christianity, they come from Buddhism, they come from Gandhi, they come from Helen Keller, who was a deeply spiritual, remarkable human being. Margaret Mead, and I collect them, and I write a few of my own. I have a slideshow that I've created, which are the 30 or so principles. I showed it twice now at Cal State Long Beach as part of their spirituality. And there's no talking, it's just Native American music. And I will be showing that, because what I say is that any one of those spiritual teachings could be a 24-hour workshop. Taken together, they are truly what I would call a TOT, a tapestry of transformation. Because what needs to change now, and I'll even quote this, we don't really need any new techniques. We got lots of techniques. And there's a saying in here from John Wellwood, what we need is a change of heart and a change of perspective, so that we can, and you know, what I often say is that so much of this has been about fix those kids, I'm gonna drop them off, I want him to come back fixed, I don't like him the way he is. We need to fix it. You know, Jesus said, physician, heal thyself. Parent, practitioner, we need to heal ourselves. We need to do our own spiritual work instead of constantly thinking it's about them, because it's not.
Right.
And they're not missing any pieces. They're fine.
Well, and there's, it's so hard to marry these things together. I was just saying to my husband the other day, do you remember those things that we used to look at in the 90s, that they were paintings, that if you stared at it long enough, you could see something 3D inside the painting? But if you didn't quite get into it, you couldn't see it. And I think it's hard. What I've learned is that people who have young kids on the spectrum, they're all about, and believe me, I agree that there are things to be done to help a child.
Every child.
Every child. And we would want to get
reach their potential.
To reach their fullest potential.
Absolutely.
But there are people who, along the way, get into, why are we trying to change my child? I'm not trying to change my child, who my child is. I'm trying to give him the ability to do all the things that he wants to do. It's a shift, a way of looking at things. But there are people who, as you said, give up and think that my child can't progress.
Right.
That's not a good place to be in.
Right.
And then there are people who think, I need to get my child to change completely who they are. And people on both sides don't know how they can come together in the middle, that you can work on something and make progress, but love what it is. I always say it's the difference between acceptance and contentment.
And I always say the gold standard, one of the things that we're now we're being forced, your boy is 12, well, I'm working with a lot of people whose children are 22 and 23,
Yes.
and this is becoming a huge issue.
Yes.
And to me, the gold standard is quality of life long term.
Yeah.
And that has not been part of the conversation. The conversation's been about making short-term gains, and I have to tell you, we're not doing well in that sense. We've invested into what I call expensive, extensive, and intensive interventions. There's my rhyming again.
Yes.
And the results are not promising. And I'm wondering if this is not, and it's hard, people who are zealots for a particular type of therapy will argue the case, but I've done scientific, I've reviewed the scientific, and there is no evidence that what we're doing has long-term impact.
I can't wait for you to meet the people that I work with.
Okay.
We're gonna blow your mind, but that's okay.
Here's the Einstein quote.
Yes, where's the quote?
Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid.
Yeah, yeah.
And boy, Albert Hathaway, he was a regular Einstein.
Yeah, he was.
He was a genius in more than just science.
Well, and I remember as a young teacher hearing about the study that they did in Europe, and it sounds terrible, and I think, what a horrible, horrible study, but they took two groups of kids, I believe they were in 3rd grade.
Okay.
Tested them both groups of people, found who tested, and whether we believe in testing, right? This calls into question that, but tested them and saw who seemed to be more capable and who seemed to be less capable. Then they went to both groups of kids and their parents and their teachers and told them the exact opposite of what the test study said. And said to the kids who had scored well on the test, your child didn't score well on the test, they're behind. They said that to the parent, to the teacher, and the child. Went to the kids who didn't do well on the test, told all the kids, the parents, the teachers, your kids scored so well on this test, left it alone for a year, came back and tested the kids, and the test results had switched to what they said it was.
Because
it's interesting, self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's that, I often say, I have a saying that, I don't know if I put it into this or not, I think I did. When it comes to children, and by the way, people often say to me, well, this vision of wholeness thing, wouldn't that apply to all children? And I say, yes, of course. We need to see them whole. And we also, part of this is that we need to take, one of my spiritual principles comes from the Talmud. Da lifnei me'ata omed. Know before whom you stand.
Yeah.
But how can you do that when you're given 15 minutes to evaluate a child? It takes hours, weeks, and I hear people say, well, we don't have time for that. In the current system, we don't have time. But I can tell you, if we shifted the system, we could do for pennies on a dollar what we're throwing down a rat hole, in my opinion. It's the healing power of relationship. And here's the thing. All people, but particularly children on the spectrum who've been through so much, who got to the point where they literally believe that everyone in their life is trying to change them, because they come in for 45 minutes with an agenda to change them, that when you're with them, and you know this is the people you work with. If you take the time, and I don't work on the clock, I have, I have a ministry. It's what I do. It's part of my ministry. I live simply, so I don't need a whole lot, you know. I want to make sure I'm treated fairly. But if I go in for an hour session and we're making progress and there's time, I'll stay for 3 hours.
Right.
And what happens is over time, a level of trust builds up.
Yeah.
And you begin to see things about that child that nobody, including the parents, have seen.
Yeah.
As an outsider, I often can achieve things because I don't have that difficult. Plus, when I'm done, I can give the child back. So that kind of thing. So what often happens is little nuances, maybe a look in the eye, a look on the face. And that's where you have to, you know, I study mindfulness for this very reason, because you have to be absolutely present. If I'm busy looking at my notebook, well, I have to achieve this. Well, what if something comes up that's not in my notebook? What do I do with that? Well, I just ignore it.
Right.
No, I don't ignore it, because the things, those little nuances, very likely are more important than anything I had. And I have to constantly, dynamically change whatever little agenda I have to acknowledge the fact that in the process of being with this child in this level of depth, that child showed me something.
Wonderful.
That's been dying, that he or she has been dying to get out, didn't know how to do it, and they may not have language. A lot of my students, but there's other ways. You know, as I said, sometimes it's just where the child often seems so stressed and like the child is suffering. You can see it. All of a sudden, they go to another place, and some level of calm comes over them.
Fascinating conversation. We could talk forever, but I want to remind everybody that you're, and of course I've lost it on my iPad now, but thank you. A spiritual, and I got to back up, a spiritual response to autism, the essential role of spirituality in understanding and nurturing children with autism spectrum disorders. It's a workshop. It's being co-sponsored by A Vision for Wholeness and the Temple Judea and the Kalsman Institute and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. That's quite a list there. It's happening on Sunday, April 26th from 3:30 to 5:30. You should RSVP. You can contact the cantor himself, Vision of Wholeness. You can also go to the website www.templejudea.com. And what was your website again for Vision of Wholeness?
It is visionofwholeness.org.
So A Vision of Wholeness.
Just vision.
Visionofwholeness.org. Okay. And that is happening in Tarzana, California on the 26th. Totally free.
Totally free. We'll even have cookies and punch.
Can't beat that. Cookies and punch. We thank you so much for being with us. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful event that people will get a lot out of.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Truly
you
a pleasure.
so much. We're going to be back with more Autism Live after these messages.
Nick was diagnosed with autism in 1994 at the age of 4. He received 5 years of therapy from CARD that eventually faded out. Nick recovered from autism in 2001.
The song I'm about to perform is by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. CARD helped many patients, myself, to recover to this level now.
Cheryl and Mike's son, Jack Riley, was diagnosed with autism in 2010 at age 2. He's been receiving therapy from CARD for a year and a half. Today, Cheryl, Mike, and Nick meet for the first time.
I'm curious as to what you remember.
I certainly remember pretty long sessions, and I'd be frustrated if I would make mistakes. I mean, I remember one time I had to count a row of 6 blocks, kept messing up. That was really difficult.
Oh, I need it.
No.
I need it. I need it.
At what point do you recall hearing the word autism?
I was able to figure out what I was going through without anybody having to tell me.
Our concern is if it's a big secret to hide. I don't know what we can say.
No one ever told you, you just discerned
But
it?
the reason I'm comfortable talking about this is because I felt it. In therapy, I certainly began questioning why people reacted as they did based on what I said and did. Particularly because of difficulties I was facing in school. It got to a point where I wanted to understand why it was. I entered while still going through therapy and still showing significant signs of the mental condition. Even after I'd improved to a significant extent, there were those who still gave me a hard time for it.
Did it hurt your feelings when you were in school, the way that kids...
Oh, absolutely, because it was bullying, it was harassment.
That scares us.
They called me names. I was basically, when it came to sports and PE, I was usually the last kid chosen.
Did teachers intervene?
Fortunately, not really. I mean, it was just so hard for me to talk about it because of how ashamed I felt. You know, certainly the first few years of elementary school, I don't think I really had the most supportive teachers. I mean, I remember my mom told me how my first grade teacher once said that she thought I had no chance of getting anywhere. And going away to college and out of state and being the only person from my old school district has made a difference. It's just really improved my social life tremendously because I got to be me, because with nobody knowing about my past, I wasn't faced with these misconceptions and prejudgments.
Do you tell people, new people that you meet?
No, that's not the first thing I will ever
No, I would
tell
hope it's not the
and
first thing.
You know what? In most cases, I never do, because while it's a part of my past, it doesn't define who I am. I mean, just thinking back to the very beginning, pretty much each episode, autism, what, not who.
I want to tell you right now, though, I'm so impressed with you.
Likewise.
I want you to know that.
Likewise. I mean, your son really inspires me just as much because I'll tell you anytime.
I adore him, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging.
I mean,
it's cost me the stuff that like career things, goals. I don't care about those anymore. I work at night. I'm tending bar. Not that I'm too good for that. I'm just saying that's what I do. I want him to have a chance.
Right.
And you inspire me now.
Thank you. The feeling goes both ways. The feeling's mutual.
Before you leave today, we would like you to meet Jack.
I would love to.
This is Nick. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Jack Riley.
All right, should we try this? I'm gonna try to take a picture of all of you. 1, 2, and 3.
Jack Riley, you rock.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's gonna play football, he's gonna do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, you know, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle, and without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Mark it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. You know, we underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's gonna play football, he's gonna do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but you know, we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What
yeah.
did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle, and without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. We underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
Welcome back to Autism Live, and I'm glad that you got an opportunity to watch The A Word. Want to remind you that that's an ongoing documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. You can check it out. It's got its very own YouTube page, and you can watch that entire series. I was having a conversation with Cantor Steve. It becomes more and more clear to me as I'm here and I hear from people. And you guys know, if you watch the show, that I talk a lot about the difference between quality ABA and, I guess the garden variety of ABA. I am reminded on a daily basis of how lucky I am to have found what I found. And I want to remind all of you that it's important that if you're starting an ABA program like Jack Riley's, that you take the time to make sure that you're getting a good quality ABA program. We talk about what the differences are from time to time in the show, and we just went through some different things about actually treating your child as if they are someone who is capable of making progress, first of all, and figuring out what progress is important to you and is important to your child. I think equally important to a quality ABA program. Now, I mentioned before that we have so many questions that you guys wrote in from the period of time that we were off, and I want to start to deal with a couple of them. In particular, we're going to be talking about IEPs in just a little while, and somebody wrote in and said, "I have a question. I just had my IEP, and he is 9, and I asked for an aid. They laughed at me and said, no, not going to happen. He is being set," and they go on to say, "he is being set up for failure. What do you do when you know he's going to fail without one?" Well, tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm sure that many of you saw the Dateline special that was on Sunday night, and all this month NBC is doing a series on autism. And my heart was bleeding in the beginning of that NBC special because it was moms talking about the fact that their children had services that were working for them and they were about to lose them because they were aging out of them, and that they didn't know what to do. And I said to my husband, it's almost like watching the car accident. I know what's going to happen. I just want to get it over with, is that at some point these moms are going to have that realization, and it goes right along with our theme about be the change. The moms are going to go through this period of mourning of why isn't this working, and they're going to be on the phone asking everybody about, what do you have, what do you don't have. They're going to go through a period of mourning, and then they're going to get to the shift. And for those of you who have birthed babies, it's the same as the transition of, when you're fully dilated, there's that scary moment where you go into transition right before you begin to push and you're going to birth the baby. And I think it's the same thing, that the parents dealing with the loss of services or not having the services go through this hope of, I think it's going to be this way and somebody is going to help me, and I'm just going to call and it's mysteriously going to be handed to me. And I guess occasionally that happens to some people, but most of the time what happens is somebody makes the decision, well, if it's not there, I'm going to create it. Or if it's not there in the way that I need it, I'm going to create it. I'm going to be the change. I'm going to call somebody and I'm going to work together with a group of people, because you can never do it on your own. But you're going to create it. So right now, you've gone to your school and you've said to them, my child needs an aid. My child is 9 and he needs an aid in order to succeed, and they laughed at you. There's nothing that I can say, because that is inexcusable behavior. There is no way to forgive that. It's unforgivable. No one should ever laugh at anyone when a parent says my child needs X, Y, or Z. If you disagree, that's one thing, but to laugh at somebody, inappropriate. I will say to all of you, if you're going into IEP meetings this month or any month, take a tape recorder. Because if you were to catch them laughing at you asking for an aid for your child, I guarantee you that there would be a lawyer who would take that case. It's not appropriate, and it would help you to win at getting what your child needs. So the first line of defense always is take the tape recorder into the IEP meetings. It will ensure that the people at the meeting will behave like the professionals that they should be acting like, or they will pay the consequences for it. And that is a huge, huge thing in your favor, to be empowered in that way. Now, I'm gonna guess that you didn't have that with you when you went in and when they laughed. And you know what? There have been times when I've gone into an IEP without a tape recorder for various and sundry reasons. So it's not about beating yourself up for it. It's about moving forward from here. So you have a choice at this point. You can either align your ducks and fight with them. And in a lot of cases, that's a worthwhile thing to do, because if you feel like you can get enough documentation, which would suggest that the kinds of things that would go in your favor is if you've been able to demonstrate that your child can do the work in the class and they can do the behavior in the class, but they just can't maintain it for a long period of time, that would be a case for an aid. And if you have a way of proving that very quickly, then you could proceed and fight with them. But I will also tell you that the other alternative is to not fight with them and go to a different school. Now, it may be that it's a school that you get funding from the school that you would be fighting with them to get that, or it may be that there's government funding for the other school, or it may mean there have been people who have moved to be in the district of a school where they're not going to have to fight in that way. It's tough at 9 to request an aid, because the schools are not going to want to pay for it at age 9. That's a reality, so we're going to put that out to you. But there are ways around that. Like, maybe your child doesn't need an aid. Maybe your child needs to be in a setting that has fewer students per teacher. That might be another way of looking at it. I don't know, because I don't know your child, but I think that you're going to have to take a moment with yourself and say, first of all, it's not appropriate that they laughed. And here's what my child needs, and here's my game plan for how I'm going to go about finding a place that could give it to him. That's got to be the first thing on your agenda, is like, is there a case to be made at the school that you're at? Is there somebody who has a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old who has an aid? And is there a way that you can get information about the similarities between your child and that child? Every child is individual, but if you can say to them, well, this child has an aid and why doesn't mine? You want to say that very nicely into the tape recorder. It does help you to build your case. But look at other schools as well. I can't tell you how much I wish that somebody had said that to me at some point, because I only knew to stay in that trench and fight with that school. And I did, and I'm not sorry that I did, because I think I got what I needed for my child out of fighting with them, but it was exhausting and we wasted time on fighting, time that I could have taken him to someplace else and had him learning, and that I wouldn't have to fight. So you gotta pick what's most at benefit for you. Fighting with this group, and you can, there are ways to go about it. It will be a tough uphill climb, I'm gonna be honest with you, to get an aid for a 9-year-old, because they're gonna feel like, yeah, we've already spent that money that we would have spent on something else. They have It's a reality. They have a pool of money, and whoever fought longest, earliest often gets it. But I'm not saying it's impossible. It just might be easier to go someplace else. But the one thing you can't do is say, oh, they're right, because they're not. If you feel in your gut that your child is needing more support, then chances are that that's the case. Be very careful about accepting a more restrictive environment as a compromise for them not giving you an aid. Do you understand what I mean by that? Is that what's better for the school and for the budget is to have your child go be in a setting where we've grouped together a group of individuals who are having difficulties, and we put one teacher, and maybe there's 8 kids or there's 12 kids as opposed to the 30 kids that are in the classroom where you're asking for the aid. That's a more restrictive environment. That's not always appropriate. But if you accept a more restrictive environment instead of more support, the school will be thrilled. For some kids, that's the right setting. For other kids, it's not. Make sure that you know whether it's right for your child before you say yes to it. I'm sending you a hug through the airwaves because I know you're facing a lot, but I want you to trust that you are an empowered person. You are going to find what's right for your child. It is going to be okay because you're on the job. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with some more questions from you guys after this.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The skills assessment and curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The skills assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the skills assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tax, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Autism Live Lite, as we're referring to it. You may notice that our settings are a little bit different. We're in our interim studio, a makeshift studio, while our studio is being built here at Tower 1, Warner Center, Woodland Hills, California. We're really excited about the changes, and we're hoping that you'll go with the flow with us as we approach this adventure that we're on, shall we say. We've been answering questions that you guys have written in over the break, and the next one, I had a great time with this question. Somebody wrote in and said, do you know of any free resources for touch math? Now, some of you might be using touch math. It's a great way to teach kids of all ages. Actually, that's not true. Kids, particularly young kids. I think it's hard to teach kids touch math after a certain age when they've learned math in other ways. But it's very visual and helps kids to be able to add and subtract. And it's something that's pretty worksheet intensive. So they said, do you know any free resources for touch math? And guess where I found the most fabulous resource? Pinterest. So if you go onto Pinterest and put in free touch math, oh my gosh, I had such a good time last night looking at all the things that were available. They have free printables, they have worksheets, they have ideas, they have posters. It was absolutely amazing. They had lesson plans of ways that you could use touch math and ways that you could apply touch math to other things. It was just a cornucopia of free goodness. How's that? So definitely, if you're looking for touch math resources, check out Pinterest. I love Pinterest, and I hope find me on Pinterest, and I've got a big autism board there that I keep adding to, and I also add activities for different. I love Pinterest. Pinterest is fun. If you've never been on it before, be careful. Schedule some time because it's like falling into a pit, and it'll take you a while to get back out of it because it's so much fun. But lots of free touch math resources on there. Okay, another person who wrote in and said, what's the next step when you have a feeling your child is off, but the doctor seems to think it's normal? Well, it's really important that we remember to ask people who are experts in something, because there's that thing that Maya Angelou always used to say, never take a no from somebody who wasn't authorized to give you a yes. And this applies to when you're asking for a discount at a store. This applies to absolutely everything, including when you're talking to your pediatrician about something specifically wrong with your child. You would never, I'm going to give it a really gross example, but you would never go to your mechanic who takes care of your carburetor and ask him if you should get heart surgery on your heart, right? You would never do that because your mechanic, while he might have an opinion on your heart, isn't somebody who is really authorized to give you a yes, you should have that heart surgery, or no, you shouldn't, right? He'll have an opinion, but regular pediatricians are not equipped to diagnose autism. Let's just be really upfront and clear about that. Developmental pediatricians are equipped to give an autism diagnosis, but a regular pediatrician isn't. If you're talking to your regular pediatrician and you're saying to them, I feel like something isn't right, and they go, no, it's normal. And let me tell you, I had that happen. I went to a regular pediatrician and said, I feel like my child is losing language. And you guys know what that cost me to say that, to go to the appointment. And I'm not talking about just the dollars for the copay. Emotionally, for me to go take all the worry and go to the pediatrician and say, I feel like something's up, something's wrong. And she said, no, boys are late talkers. He was talking before, he'll talk again. Don't worry. And I lost time. I work on, in my life, being able to forgive myself and to forgive that doctor for having said that. But mostly myself for having listened, because my gut screamed, no, I don't believe you. But it took me another 6 months to go to the developmental pediatrician who said, yeah, autism. So go to somebody who's authorized to give you a yes, and don't be afraid of what they say. Because if they say, no, in my opinion, this really isn't autism, this is something else, they're still going to be able to say, this is what you can do for what is happening. Because something's going on. You feel like something is off, something is going on. It may not be as big as you think it is. It may be something that's quite easily taken care of, but you're not going to know until you get your answer. So go to a developmental pediatrician or go to a place that is renowned for diagnosing autism and get your child looked at without fear. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with more Autism Live after these messages. Another parent wants to know, how do I find out that one thing that my kid is really good at?
Now, when they get older, they're going to kind of divide into two groups. You're going to have the kids that become verbal, and then you're going to have the kids that are nonverbal, got many more problems. Maybe they still have epilepsy or some other problem. And they kind of need different services. And the ones that get verbal, what we need to be doing with them is develop the area of strength. And that area of strength often will show up around 3rd or 4th grade, sometimes earlier, but my ability in art showed up when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, and it was always encouraged. And I was encouraged to do lots of different kinds of art. Otherwise, it would have just been endless horse heads. You know, Mother would say to me, why don't you draw a picture of a beach or something else? You want to broaden it out. If the kid's fixated on trains, let's teach reading with trains, math with trains. Tap into that fixation, but develop the area of strength. Some kids it's going to be art. Other kids it's going to be mathematics. So you got a 3rd grader who's smart in math, and he wants a 6th grade math book. Give him the 6th grade math book. Don't bore him with the baby stuff. But that kid's going to have trouble with reading, because the common thing is the uneven skills. And then you have the kids that are the history buffs, and these kids are often really good at writing skills. You tend to have uneven skills, but tap into their fixations and use those to motivate, but broaden. If he likes trains, just watching them, well, we're going to take that interest in trains to do some math with it, or maybe read about the history of the railroad. You know, tap into that motivation. One of the things I really want to talk about is we got to stretch these kids. I'm not talking about physically stretching them, mentally stretching them to do new things. I'm seeing too many kids that haven't learned how to shop, how to order food at McDonald's. So you start out, let's say it's ordering food at McDonald's or at Burger King. So you take them up there and they watch you order it. And then eventually you go in when the store's not busy, and they have to go up and order it while you're sitting at the table watching, and then you coach them. And then eventually they can go in the restaurant themselves. I can remember I was scared to go to the lumber yard alone and buy lumber. And Mother made me go. And she knew I could do it. I had bought lumber with her many times. But there's a tendency to want to have somebody else there when they do it, and they've got to learn how to do things alone. And you gradually have got to kind of push it. You've got to stretch them. And I'm seeing too many kids not learning basic skills. Saw a 19-year-old honor student that actually knows how to drive that had never shopped in the grocery store all by herself. That is just ridiculous. You know, you've got to stretch them. You push too hard, there can be panic. And the other thing is no surprises. No surprises. I knew all about the ranch long before I went there. I talked to Ann. But if you don't stretch these kids, they don't grow.
Welcome back to Autism Live, Autism Live Light, I'm enjoying calling it. We are with less technology as we are in our makeshift studio while our new studio is being built here at the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. But we're here, and we're glad to be back, and we're thrilled to be here with you. We're taking a couple of minutes to answer some questions that you guys have written in during the break, and a lot of them I saved for tomorrow when we have Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet here live. Because they require a BCBA's touch. But some of these are questions that have to do with school, and while I am not an expert in autism, I am a former teacher and sat on one side of the IEP table, and now I sit on the other side of the IEP table, and you know, there's a little bit of that I can attest to that I can talk about. So our next question, somebody wrote in and said, I have a child who's 17 and a half years old. He is on grade level 2 and low speech. He is in high school now, public school, and they are trying to take away his speech, PT, which is physical therapy, and OT. They are saying he has reached his level. And they go on to say, he's still improving. I do not want to give up. They say his speech will never get better. To introduce him to an augmentative device at this age would be very hard, I would think. Okay, so there's a couple of different things in there, and I don't know if our good friend Mike Hipple is watching, but I feel, Mike, I'm channeling you right now, and that Mike would say to you, let him have an augmentative device. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stop working on speech, though, so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think it's a great thing to give anyone of any age an augmentative device so that they have the ability to speak in as many different ways as they can. You know, you say that your son has low speech, but it's very encouraging to me that he has speech. At 17 and a half, if he had no speech, I would never say to you that there's no hope. But at 17 and a half, if there was no speech whatsoever, I would certainly be saying to you, invest in some time on an augmentative device and put as much of your energy into that as you possibly can, because, how do I say this nicely? It's almost, I think you're going to be mad at yourself when you see how much it gives him to be able to communicate. And that it doesn't matter, how we find the way to do it. It is absolutely essential from a human rights perspective to give people as many different ways to communicate as we possibly can. If you, there were a bunch of people who on World Autism Awareness Day decided not to speak. And it was something that we talked about doing here, and I don't know that we're not going to do it later on in the year, take a day where we don't speak at all. I have had nodes before, and I used to perform, and I've had nodes where there was a 6-week period of time where I was not allowed to speak at all, so I know a little bit about what it feels like. And I can tell you that it was life-changing for me to experience what it's like to not be able to speak for 6 weeks, knowing that I would be able to speak again, and knowing that I had the ability to write things down on a little pad that I wore around my neck. It was eye-opening to me. I can't imagine what it would be like if somebody had said, you don't get to speak, you don't get to have the little thing the little pad that I wore around my neck and had a pen with me at all times so that I could write notes to people. I would have been lost. I found it so personally frustrating. So I beg you to please let your son have an augmentative device. And I know Mike would talk to you about his device. I personally am am very fond of giving our kids iPads, maybe to start with, and then you can move to something else if you feel like you need something else. But an iPad still has that element of being cool and looking cool, and it's lightweight. And there are so many programs that are so quick on an iPad. And it's relatively inexpensive compared to some of the more hardcore hardware augmentative devices. But Mike, I'll count on you to weigh in at some point on this, because Mike is a huge champion for augmentative devices for all individuals who have communication issues, and I agree with you, Mike. But now back to the other thing about your speech, PT, and OT, and them saying he's reached his limit. I would make sure that you get them to say that on a tape recorder, because that's just crazy talk. For somebody to say this person has reached their potential, if you can get them to say that into a tape recorder, just call an emergency IEP meeting and say, I want to have a discussion, and you can say to them, and say, I need a tape recorder at the meeting, and the first question out the gate that you can say to them is, can you tell me exactly why you feel that you need to stop his speech, OT, and PT, and let them stammer. But if they say, well, he's reached his full potential, ask them, I'm sorry, what test did you do that showed that he has reached his full potential? And if you've said to me that he's still making progress, and if he has continued making progress in the last few IEPs and the benchmarks, you can bring that out and say, I don't understand, what are you basing this on? And just, bully them into getting to the point where they say he's reached his progress. And when they do say that, say, really? Like, you have a test that shows what people's potential is? You have a way of knowing that? Can you show me on paper where you found that? Because they don't. Nobody does. No one has a way of showing somebody's potential. So there's no way that they can. And at that point, then you can sit back and watch them hem and haw and stammer and say to them, we're not, at the very least, what you can do is say, no, we don't agree to this IEP, and, I guess, we'll have to go to due process. I don't think they'll go to due process, but, they might. We know, and I know for a fact that a lot of times schools will say, oh, well, then we will go to due process, but what they really mean is we want to get you in mediation because we want to whittle it down and put a gag order on you. But, it's too much, depending on how much PT, OT, and speech he has, it's too much for them to argue. If you show them that you're not going to back down, chances are they won't. Can't promise you that. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been in many IEP meetings. So don't listen to them. Your child has not reached his full potential. I think it's still worthwhile doing those things, but I beg you, let him have the augmentative device. It's never too old to learn new ways to communicate. Okay, and then one last question before we take a break, and then we're going to talk about how to empower yourself at an IEP with the skills program. Somebody wrote in and said, I'm confused. Do people with autism have problem with memory? Because I know a lot of people on the spectrum who have good memory, but you guys always talk about memory. Well, let's remember that there's lots of different kinds of memory, right? And this is the thing with autism, is that you can have great skills in one area. The young man who's on the autism spectrum, that you can show him a picture of, you can fly over Paris in a helicopter and then set him down in a studio and he can draw the whole thing from memory, the whole entire thing in a way that you and I could never even dream of. It's miraculous, right? That's a certain kind of memory. I don't know that that individual could remember the multiplication table or a PIN number or what his address is, or where he put his keys, right? You and I, like there might be something, there are some kinds of memory, I can look at a piece of dialogue and I can memorize it by heart very quickly. Quicker than most people can. It's a great, great thing because I'm very visual. But if you ask me to remember my phone number, heaven help us, I can't remember numbers, and I can't remember them in sequences. So there are different kinds of working memory. There's working memory, there's episodic memory, there's long-term memory, there's short-term memory. There are so many, it's like they're in different pockets of your brain, and we need to not think of them as one. So your memory can always be strengthened. I would encourage you to watch on the DVD Recovered. There is a scene where Vince Redmond, who's on our show on a regular basis as a very young man, I think he's in his early 20s, sits with a young girl, Jana, and he tells her about a bunny. And he says, okay, I'm going to tell you the story of the bunny, and then I'm going to ask you questions about the bunny. So here's the bunny. The bunny's name is Scott. And she says, okay. And he says, and the bunny went and it ate this and it ate that. And then he stops and he says, so what's the bunny's name? And you see this little girl struggling to remember. She cannot remember that the name of the bunny is Scott. And it's because her brain is not used to using this muscle in a certain way, and over time they do therapy with her to help her. And you see that moment where poor Jana is sitting there and she wants to be able to access the information about what is Scott's name, but she can't. And then we get to see her as a 16-year-old, and she can remember all kinds of things. And I have met Jana as an adult, and she is a brilliant, talented, well-spoken young woman who remembers who I am, and I've met her like 4 times, and yet she remembers me. There are people who've met me 80 times and don't remember me. You know what I'm saying? So memory can be strengthened, but you kind of have to know which kind of memory you're strengthening. And each individual on this planet has different areas of strengths and weaknesses in all areas, including memory, and so do people on the autism spectrum. Sometimes their strengths in a certain category of memory are off the chart awesome, and other times their weaknesses in a certain area are debilitating. So that's why we talk about memory and strengthening, because it's something that we can get in and work the muscle and see improvement on and get to that progress that we love to talk about. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about skills and how you can use it to empower yourself at an IEP meeting. So stick with us. Monica Holloway is a critically acclaimed author, speaker, and activist. She is also an autism mom. Her son Wills was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. Now, at the age of 15, Wills is a high school freshman, attending a mainstream school.
I'm in a brand new school. I'm in a great school that I love, and I'm really happy there. I made friends pretty quickly on the first day, and something interesting happened to me on the first day.
Tell me.
We were doing an art project with fabric markers, and there was a little label on it that said squeeze for best results.
Okay.
And so I squeezed it and it exploded all over the people at my table.
Oh no!
And we were all covered in little blue dots.
I asked Wills how he describes autism to people.
I say that I have Asperger's syndrome, which is a slight form of autism. It doesn't make you any different. It really doesn't. It's just there, and it just kind of makes you who you are.
I asked Wills what he thought of the Sandy Hook shooter's actions being linked to autism.
Please, just don't be scared of autism. If somebody has autism, don't be scared of them. Chances are they're not violent. They're just like you or me.
Monica is a proud mom with good cause. I asked her to describe Wills in 5 words.
Generous, curious, funny, sensitive, loving.
We had a chance to talk about the Sandy Hook massacre and how Monica heard the news.
On Friday, when the shooting happened in Connecticut, I was in my car, and my husband Michael called to tell me what had happened. And I was in a state of shock, as I think we all were, but that many children. And I felt, I guess a mind can't take in that kind of information without feeling nauseous. I felt it go from here all the way down my body. I started calling everybody I knew to tell them I loved them, and I was thinking about them, and I just wanted to be with the people that I knew. I started hearing more and more information come on the news about this shooter having Asperger's or being autistic. And then I started hearing things about, well, does autism cause violence? And I was in a whole other level of shock. Never in a million years would I think that somebody might associate us and my son's face with the face of violence just because he has Asperger's. And I've seen bad days and good days, and that's what kills me, is like there was not a day bad enough to ever make me think that he or any of his friends could ever be violent. The only thing that made me even feel a little bit better, to do something to help educate. And so we've started a campaign on my Facebook page, Cowboy and Wills. It's called I Am the Face of Autism. And please post a picture of yourself. It can be your child, your friend with autism. Let's put these beautiful faces of these people with autism on to wipe out the face of this murderer. Let's put our faces in front of his.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Now, if you watch this show, you know that I love me some skills. I think that skills is one of the greatest tools that there is. The first time I saw it, I got so excited because I immediately saw that it was going to be a game changer in so many different ways. If you're unfamiliar with what skills is, it's an online tool that allows you to be able to take and really charge yourself with all of the knowledge and power that's been out there, that's good quality ABA for 2 decades, and puts it all in, kind of front loads it into your front lobe and makes it easy. You start with an assessment, you answer a bunch of questions, and it really individualizes where this particular person is in time on a whole series of different skills. More skills than we could talk about in a 2-hour program, let alone in a 10-minute discussion of it. Gives you a graph system that shows you, okay, this is where the person's receptive language is, here's where it should be, here's where their expressive language is, here's where it should be, and then it breaks down a whole bunch of all the verbal operants that we've talked about on the show before. But that's just the beginning, because it deals with social language, it deals with social skills, it deals with adaptive skills, cognition, executive functions, being able to play, being able to do arts and crafts. I mean, it's everything that an individual would need to begin to learn up until their 9th birthday. And if you say, oh, well, wait a second, you mean it's only for kids that are up to the age of 9? No, because there are a bunch of skills that emerge before the 9th birthday that we spend the rest of our lives working on, the rest of our lives. So there are skills in there that are appropriate for a 16-year-old who's high functioning to just strengthen a specific area of skill. But the first thing is we got to know where they are so that we know what lessons to teach. Now, when you go into an IEP, and I want to talk about this from all sides of the table. I have sat as a teacher at an IEP. I have sat as a parent at an IEP. We're supposed to all be there, no matter who the players are. We're supposed to be at the IEP to develop an individualized education plan or program for a person that has special needs in some direction. It could be autism, it could be something else. It may be that this individual just needs things on the adaptive area of things because they need to build life skills and they need to be able to tie their own shoes and they need to be toilet trained, right? It could be that the person needs adaptive skills and they need social skills. It could be that they have a wide range of things that they need, but absolutely every single individual who requires an IEP needs something different. They're like snowflakes. And this idea that it's one size fits all is maddening. Maddening. And worse than that, it's not effective, right? And I don't know about you, but as a parent, when I go into an IEP for my son, in the beginning, even though I had been a teacher, I was so overwhelmed because I would be there at the meeting and people would say, well, here are the goals that we have for your child for this year. And I would think, how do we know that this is appropriate? How do I know? How can I have a check and balance system so that I know that what the speech teacher gave me to work on for the next year of his education that they've devoted to, how do I know that that's right for my child? Furthermore, as a teacher, how does somebody come up with goals to say, well, here's what's appropriate to work on for the child? I mean, they can start with what the state standards are or what the Common Core standards are, but if the child is behind in a certain area, then where do they go? Do they go to the last year's Common Core areas? What's the formula? Where are we coming up with these goals to work on with kids? It's a little bit frightening to me because a lot of times it feels very cookie cutter in the approach. And I know as a teacher, when I was trying to come up with IEP goals for a student, I was always a little bit at sea at like what really is going to be effective for this individual. And where are they right now? And that can change by minute by minute. Well, this is what skills does, is it takes the question part out of that. And it says, does the assessment and says, this is where this child is at this moment in time. Now, you can always build from that. So I did my child's assessment years ago. I don't have to redo the assessment every year. As things happen and he progresses, I put it in so that I know we don't have to be doing that anymore. And I can just go in and look at what does the skill system recommend as different skills, or I can say to myself, and this is how I use it, I say to myself, I know that what I'd like for my son to be able to do is to be able to make friends on the playground. How's that for a goal? And you go, well, wait a second, how am I going to get that to my team and talk them into why this is a great goal? What I can do is I can go into my son's skills account and I can go to all of the lessons that are for social skills, and I can see the ones that are recommended for him for things that he still needs to work at, and I can find one that talks specifically about recreational fun and making friends. And so I can find that in the social skills. I can find it in the, I can find goals having to do with that in the social language part of the language curriculum, and I can find it in the play section. So I can find a wide variety of goals, and once I find the goal and I see that it's appropriate for my child, Skills is recommending it as one of the lessons that could be good for my son, it's age appropriate, it's skill appropriate, then I open up, I take the lesson and I add it to my program for my son. I open up the lesson and it has a little thing on it that says IEP benchmark. And I can push that and it takes that goal and it puts it in IEP benchmark language. So I just have to fill in the blanks and say it says by such and such date, and you have to fill in which date, and usually that's by the next year. This child will engage in this, and it says how many times, so maybe 4 out of 5 times, right? And this kind of stuff, don't be intimidated by that. If you put the wrong date and you go into the IEP meeting with it and you slide it across the table and you say, here's a goal that I would like for my son to do, they're gonna fuss with it. They're gonna change it, they're gonna rewrite it, but they're going to say, well, let's say 3 out of 5 times, or let's say that it has to be measured by this person. They're not going to take it exactly as you wrote it, but what happens is that the main part of the language of the goal, that stays. That goal gets written into your child's IEP. You have the right at an IEP meeting to come in and say, here are the 5 goals that I'm interested in. And now you don't have to go search for it all over online. If you've done the assessment portion of skills, you don't have to do that. It's all there for you. You can pick and choose from all the things that it's recommending for your child. It's kind of amazing. I've done that at the last few of my son's IEPs. It's a different conversation for me at an IEP meeting because I'll tell you quite honestly, the teachers get excited. They're like, that's a great goal. I like that goal. I'd like to add that goal. I think you're right. Your child could stand to work on that. And it leads to all kinds of conversations, and suddenly you're all on the same team. Now, I've watched teachers use this in an IEP meeting too, and it makes them look like superstars, because the administrators that are there, like if a teacher comes in and says, here's a goal that I think is appropriate for your child, and it actually is, and you think, wow, that's a goal that I really want my child to work on and that I would be very excited, and the administrators see that and it's already written out and it's something that is attainable for your child, everybody's on the same page. You have to remember that nobody wants to be at an IEP and have it be stressful and have everybody be in contention. The administrators don't want that, the teachers don't want that, the parents don't want that. But that can get lost in everybody trying to figure out what exactly needs to be done. When you put skills in everybody's hands, suddenly you don't have to guess anymore, and a teacher can say, when the parent, I asked this in IEP meeting, why do you think that's what's appropriate for my child? Well, we assessed where your child was, and this is an area where we see a deficit, and look at the strength, and they can show the graph. This is where your child has a strength, and this is where there's a weakness, and we think that if we fill this weakness in, that your child's going to be able to do the next highest skill up. Woohoo! As a parent, I'm excited when I see that. We're really getting to the real progress stuff. So where can you find skills? If you go to skillsforautism.com, you can find the skills program. If you go to sign up to try it, it'll ask you for your credit card information. It is a subscription, a monthly subscription. But if you sign up for it, you automatically get the first 14 days for free. On the 15th day, if you don't cancel, it will charge your credit card. But 15 days, my friends, is enough for you to get in there and see all the possibilities that you can do with skills. Working on it with the IEP is just one thing that you can do, but I'll tell you, if that's all it was, it would be worth it. It would be so worth it. So I personally love it. I personally use it. I've got an IEP coming up in a couple of weeks, and you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm going to be in there looking at skills. And honestly, you can work on it in so many different ways. I like to sit and think, okay, what do I really want my son to be focusing on next year? And I go about it that way. But you can do it the other way. If you are saying, I don't know how I would answer that, Shannon, I don't know what I would say, you can go in, take the assessment, and start looking through each one of the curricular areas. It will give you a pool of lessons that it will recommend for you and say, this would be a good goal. As you start to read through them, you can go, yeah, you know, I would really like it if my child could do that. You don't want to go in and ask for 25 goals, right? I think that a good amount of goals is for a child, for a parent to be recommending for a child, would be between like 3 and 6. Because it shows that you're a part of the team, that these are things that are really important to you, that the school's going to be willing to work on, but you don't want to overload them with too many things to work on. I would pay particular attention to goals that they could be working on during different times of the day. So I always think it's a good idea to have goals written into your child's IEP that are for downtimes like recess and for lunch. But it's equally important that you write in goals for things that are happening in the classroom, and even during transition times, if there's anything that's happening during transition times that's difficult. So check it out, check out skills, and please write me back and let me know if you've used it for an IEP and what happened, because I think you'll see that it opens a whole new world. Skills, it's really an amazing, amazing tool. And hey, by the way, if it's a very low cost monthly to participate in skills, but if you find that it is over your budget, don't be ashamed about that. There is a way right now that you can apply for a grant. I believe it's fast-tracked, or it's about to be fast-tracked, so you can apply for a grant on the skills program. Go directly to skillsforautism.com. And there should be a button coming up online, or you can call them and ask them about it. Act Today is working with them because they think that it's so worthwhile too, to give more grants to families who want to use skills. Please don't deny yourself the pleasure of using skills and the progress that it can give your child if you can't afford it. Please ask for a grant. Act Today has committed to giving many grants for skills. I absolutely love it. Now, we're out of time, but I want to tell you very quickly that tomorrow we got a big show for you, Dr. Doreen Grandpichet. I'm so excited. I have missed her, you guys. But so you and I get to spend an hour with her tomorrow. We got a bunch of questions for her, but please send us some more questions. Also, don't forget that Vince Redmond will be here tomorrow for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We're going to join him via Skype, but we're going to be talking about that NBC special. And with Vince Redmond, we're going to talk about getting ready for the summer. Vacation, camps, what are we doing? How are we working through this? He's going to help us through it. So that's going to be tomorrow too during Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And we've got a big show planned for you on Thursday. I hope you're liking this new format. It's very exciting. We're only doing this for a couple of weeks, and we still enjoy hearing from you guys. So please write into us. We so appreciate it. I've missed you all. Don't forget, together we can do this. Si se puede, right? So we'll be back tomorrow. Ask Dr. Doreen and Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.